All right, so suicide is self-inflicted death with the desire to die. It is a major health concern and is growing into one of the most leading causes of death in many countries. Many variables can either increase or decrease the chances of suicide. We would assume that a person's happiness score plays an important role towards whether a person has suicidal ideation, which is the thought of planning suicide or going through with it.
According to the scatter plot above, when putting the happiness scores and suicide rates together, they do not have the strongest correlation with one another. If suicidal ideation were to be correlated with happiness, there would be a much larger suicide rate when there's a lower happiness score. In this graph, it shows the average score in selected countries for both sexes. It helps to visualize a wide range of happiness throughout the countries and how they may differ from each other. You'll see this later in many other graphs. This graph shows the suicide rates in those same countries, but for males, females, and the average for both of those sexes. It helps with seeing how vastly different the suicide rate is for the two sexes in that specific country and how it compares with the other countries shown.
People speculate that suicide or suicidal ideation depends on how high a person's happiness score is, but we were proven wrong with the given data shown above. It was found that suicidal ideation does not necessarily correlate with their happiness score.
Government happiness. It's the happiness for each of the selected countries, as you saw previously. There's a bar graph that shows the happiness score of the following countries. I'm not going to say them all because most of them I don't know how to pronounce, but this is important because it helps you understand what the overall happiness is like, showing you if it's an average high or average low. Happiness and social supports, the correlation between these two. This bar graph, I can't talk. This is a bar graph that shows the social support percentage correlated to happiness score in Afghanistan and Albania. This is important because it shows you how in different countries with different social supports affect the happiness scores of countries in a major way. Going back to the previous graph, Afghanistan has a lower percentage than Albania. Furthermore, it shows how government affects the happiness of certain countries. This is the happiness score of Northern European countries. This is a bar graph that shows the happiness score percentage of Northern European countries. This is important because it helps visualize what the Northern European countries are experiencing and when it comes down to the happiness level of those countries.
So this graph shows the happiness scores and government trust. Anthony, can you scroll down, please? This chart displays the happiness scores and government trust percentages of Albania and Finland. Albania has an extremely low percentage of government trust and a fairly low happiness score as well. In contrast, Finland has a very high percentage of both government trust and happiness. From this chart, it can be seen that countries who trust their government will be happier. This chart compares the freedom percentage in correlation with happiness scores between Finland and Albania. Albania has a fairly low percentage of freedom and happiness score. Finland has both a higher freedom percentage and happiness score. This shows that the more freedom citizens of a country are given, the happier they will be. This chart shows the correlation between happiness scores and freedom throughout several countries. As freedom increases on the chart, so does happiness score of the countries. This further reinforces the idea that the more freedom countries are given, the happier they will be.
For the section summary, as you saw, this section went over how Albania is happier than Afghanistan due to certain environmental factors shown in the graphs, as well as the overall happiness of Northern European countries. Also, the correlation between Finland and Albania. These were led by certain factors, and one of these factors was social support, leading into the next section.
Moving on to the next section, which is how your social situation affects your happiness. So, this is a chart that represents the happiness levels per country overall for both sexes. The happiness level does vary from country to country, and they're all very different because of the factors around these countries and their differences. This is important since each of the countries are all very, very different, and you can see where these countries stand in their level of happiness. On to the next graph, we can see how family affects happiness. This chart shows the effect of family and how it boosts the level of happiness. This factor positively affects the level of happiness as the more family increases, the level of happiness does overall as well. Based on this data, if you are feeling unhappy, you should go see your family as they increase the levels of happiness and should boost your overall morale.
This chart shows the correlation between how healthy an individual is and how happy they are. It shows that being healthy generally leads to someone being more happy. Health is not the strongest factor in a person's happiness, but is one of the only factors that a person has control over. This is why it is important for you to lead a healthy lifestyle. The next graph, Anthony. This graph shows the happiness scores of Afghanistan and Albania and the social support percentage. This shows that the more social support people in a country receive, the happier that person tends to be. This is why it's important to surround yourself with family and friends that will support you.
And our overall summary. So, in short, overall happiness in the world is affected by the environment around a person. Going back to our graphs, you can see that the level of happiness is affected by social support, family, government trust, which are all little factors that people have little control over. There are some factors that someone does have control over, such as their health. Health is a major factor that a person can control and also has a huge effect on a person's happiness as shown by the graphs above. So, once again, people's overall happiness is affected by many environmental factors that they have little control over. That is why it is important to do the things we can control. I would encourage everyone to go visit your family, get the support you need, and live a very